This is the Bears Barroom Radio Network. The following program is recorded live and intended for all audiences.
Radio is scripted now. We just come up with it. We don't use computers. We don't rehearse. We're going to talk about this next. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Bulls. And then we're going to have Brad Biggs on. And then we're going to have all this. No. If you don't know what you're going to talk about in the top of your head before a show, you shouldn't be in the business. I don't know what you got. I feel like Vince Vaughn in a couple's retreat. The Sharks are circling. Old school, baby!
You're listening to the Mike North Advantage, and it begins right now.
That's right. The Mike North Advantage starts right now. I am Aldo Gandia, Mike's wingman, and this is what I have been waiting and praying for. It's the start of the NFL season. We have got football coming up, and when it comes to football and gambling, nobody is better at it than Mike North, my man. And nobody is better than booking great guest than Mike. He's got another one with him. I'll let him do the introduction, but I'll introduce Mike. Mike North, how are you, my friend?
I'm focused. That's how I am. I mean, let's face it. We've been going through the motions. I mean, you'd like to say that you've been bringing 100%, but you bring 100% according to what the product is. The product just jumped up, the National Football League. Now, Aldo will have some questions for our guest after I'm done with the interview, folks, and then we'll have some chat board questions for my next guest, one of my dear friends, a guy who's never forgotten where he comes from, a guy who basically I met back at Caesar's Palace. I remember it like it was yesterday when he wasn't even in the business yet. He's a giant. The guy works for Mad Dog Radio. He's on Fox. He's been all over the place. He's never denied. And in light of what's gone on, where a lot of my friends, including Tony Bruno, are under heavy heat out there in Philadelphia for things that he might say, we'll talk to our next guest about those certain situations now compared to 20, 25 years ago. Also, he is aligned, and I mean aligned with the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders. At times, I think he's the owner. We'll talk to him about the AFC. We're pleased to have on one of the great legends of sports radio, a guy that is never denied, a guy that brings it to the table, a guy I've known for almost 28 years, JT the Brick. What's up, Jay?
What an introduction coming from my favorite legend, a guy who gave me an opportunity by talking to me and telling me how to get into the business. Now I'm sitting in Las Vegas having a coffee the day before the NFL, beautiful weather, and I can't wait to talk to you, Mike.
Yeah.
Jay, it's always good to talk to you. And you know that the business is under siege at times and stuff like that, but it's still a great, great business talking about sports radio. I gotta ask you first off, you know what, we're going to talk about the Bears, we're going to talk about the AFC, but I got to ask you about being aligned with the Raiders. And when I say JT's aligned, I mean he's friends with Tom Flores, he's sort of like I was with the Bears. Although I was critical of the Bears and didn't necessarily have any kind of role with the Bears, which made it easier for me, even though I loved them as a kid. It seems to me that you've survived very well, because some people would say that's a conflict of interest, but I've never heard you be anything but strictly honest about the Raiders. But how tough is it when you do master of ceremony events? Well, you're up on the stadium now. We'll talk about that in Las Vegas. You've done walkthroughs and stuff like that. How tough of a juggling act has that been?
Well, Mike, that's a good question. It is, because I've been employed by the team during the season this will be my 22nd year. So I know where the barbed wire fence is. I know where the cliff is. And, I've always had a national show, so it's always been obvious. For the 20-plus years I've been with the Raiders, they haven't been very good. When I started with them in 98, I got hired the same day Gruden did the first time around, and the Raiders went to a Super Bowl, not with Gruden. They went to the AFC Championship game, the Tuck rule before that. So there was immediate success. And then the Raiders went on a long drought. And then just recently in 2016, they went to 12-4. So there's been a lot more lean years than there's been great years for a franchise that has played in 5 Super Bowls, won 3, played in some of the greatest games ever played, have some of the greatest players and legends to ever play the game. So they give me the freedom to be critical. But, one of the things I learned from you, and you've been around a long time, is you just don't make it personal. I mean, it's tough at times. You want to make it personal. You get really pissed off. You're upset that the team loses, but you never make it personal because you're not going to win if you get in a fight with the owner or the head coach or the general manager. You have to know your role, be critical, be honest at times, and let the fans do the talking. I put more Raider fans on the radio than anyone in the history of sports radio, and they're critical enough when they don't win, and they'll be critical in Vegas if they don't get off to a good start playing at Carolina on Sunday.
Yeah, Jay, but I will say this. I was rough on ownership in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, but I think now radio executives, program executives, teams watch or listen to every host. I know this for a fact. I got inside information on this years ago. The Chicago Bears, before Twitter or any of this other stuff, listened to our shows because we were the dominant sports station, the Score, as you know. So they listen, they call, they complain. It's changed a lot. And at times I wish I hadn't gotten his personal, telling Mike McCaskey he doesn't know what he's doing. But it was more or less in the framework of the team. I think that's changed. I think the high road is the better road now, and you can still get your points across like you've been doing for how many years now?
I've been on the radio for 24 years, been with the Raiders for 22. And Mike, you make a good point. What the difference with you, and this is really important, you had a massive radio show in a massive market. Most people don't. That's the honesty in 2020 is if you got a local show in Jacksonville or Austin, Texas, or, in a market like Albuquerque, and great, I'm happy everybody's got a job, and I hope everyone does well. You had a job and still do that's big, a lot of people, big audience, so you moved the needle. So the GM, the coach, the players are going to listen, so it's different than just being some Yahoo on some local station who's saying something and nobody hears it. You have to put your name on it, and you've been able to do that and have a great career.
Let me ask you something. Give me a player I know living. The Raiders, to me, were the AFC version of the Bears. I mean, we in Chicago don't have an axe to grind with the Oakland Raiders. Believe me when I tell you this. I mean, I knew who Jack Tatum was. I knew who Fred Biletnikoff was. I mean, I knew all those guys. Stabler was one of my favorite players. When you talk about favorite players in AFC lore, in an NFL or an NFC town, most of my favorites, Willie Brown, Atkinson. I mean, you knew every guy by name. You knew the coaches and the whole ball of wax. And I got to believe that when you see the Oakland Raiders move to Las Vegas, a guy that's lived in Las Vegas all these years, in a brand new stadium being empty, how much of a downer, no matter how you try to play up, they're here, that never happened before, we didn't think it was going to happen, they're Las Vegas. But, man, you know how gigantic it would have been with a full house.
Mike, it's devastating. I've been in the stadium twice for broadcast and streams and practice, and it's so amazing to see. The Rams and the Chargers, the Rams built the biggest stadium in the world, Stan Canyon as they're calling it, but it's in Inglewood. No disrespect to Inglewood. That's not Malibu and Hollywood, as you know.
That's a ride. That's a tough ride.
Yeah, and they built the Allegiant Stadium, the Raiders Stadium, on the Strip. Literally, you can walk from the Mandalay Bay, the Luxor, the MGM to the game. So it's a complete game changer. Plus, they're not splitting the stadium. You've been to the Coliseum. The Oakland A's played there. The Raiders played on a dirt infield during baseball season. Now they have their own stadium in a state that has no state taxes, where you could leave the Bay Area and buy a house twice as big for half the money. And people love it here. You could travel in and out of Vegas quickly. The gambling, as you know, the restaurants, everything is high end. So it's going to be great. But believe me, walking into this Taj Mahal and this place, all the artwork, the club sections, all the bells and whistles, the torch they have for Al Davis. They have a parasol window. It's a dome stadium, but a window that opens up onto the Strip at night to see it on Monday night and Sunday Night Football. And the owner, Mark Davis, said, if all of my fans can't go, not only will he not go, no one will go. I think it was the right decision. He was the only owner, the first owner who stepped up a month or so ago and said, no, it's not happening, because I care as much about my fans in the upper deck as I do of the $1 million suite owners right next to me. I think it was a good decision. We'll do it big next year. It'll be a big party next year.
Who from the Raiders in the past, and I named a lot of great players off, but who from the Raiders has ever come up to you and said, hey, why don't you take it easy on me? Has that happened at all? Or for the most part, because you know how to construct criticism in a way where people are going to understand it, including the player. Have you heard from any of them or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jerry Porter, who was a wide receiver, a really good one. He was the third receiver to Tim Brown and Jerry Rice in their Super Bowl year. He had an icing out period with me for a number of years because I thought, fairly critical of him. And Derek Carr, I hosted the Derek Carr show on the radio when he was 11-4. He broke his ankle the last game of the year. He was third in the MVP voting. And Derek and I have a really good relationship, but from time to time, when he's playing poorly, I got to point it out. And this year is a good example. The Raiders brought in Marcus Mariota to back him up. He hasn't looked good. It's Carr's team. Carr, as you know, is going on all radio shows saying that he's sick of being disrespected. He doesn't care anymore and he wants to win. And Derek has been a guy that I've gone back and forth with at a respectful level, and we both respect everybody. But this is another year where he, who was an MVP candidate, who had 4,000 yards and 70% completion last year, that won't be good enough for the Raiders to get to the playoffs this year, coming off a team that missed the playoffs by one game last year and got robbed at home in the last game of the year. Carr's got to play like an MVP candidate, Mike. I'm sure we'll get into it for them to have a shot.
I got to ask you about Antonio Brown. It could have set the franchise back a ton. It didn't. I got to give credit to Gruden and Mayock. I think he's a bad guy. I'm sorry. I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon like everybody else. Oh, I wish he was on my team. No, I wish he wasn't. How much of a nightmare was that for guys that were just getting in the door? And where did you think this was going to end up about where it ended up?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. He was charming to meet him. He came into the Raiders as not one of, he was the best wide receiver in football for a long time, and still young enough in the prime of his career. And I thought the Raiders were smart to go get him. His introductory press conference, he had his kids with him. He was smiling. He talked about Biletnikoff, Cliff Branch, and he wanted to be a great Raider. And then, Mike, unfortunately, it not only happens in football, it happens in life. His mind started to deteriorate. He had mental issues where, the frozen feet. Then he was listening to his agent. He was looking at social media, and he was having a significant problem with the mother of his children, and that started to unravel, as you know. Fortunately for the Raiders, they were able to get out of it at the very last second, the Saturday before their Monday night opener at home a year ago, and they didn't have to pay him, which worked out to be well, and now they've moved on. But I would have loved to have seen him. And Gruden loved him. It would have been great to see him play if he got in line, but he's one of the few athletes in all of sports that mentally unraveled and couldn't handle it, and it's unfortunate because he was a great, great player.
Let's talk about you now. Let's talk about, you talked to me yesterday when I called you, and you basically said, I'm going to be working around the clock. That's what you've been doing. The money has definitely changed in radio. That I know for a fact, where guys now who are hardworking can out-hustle other people and do more than one job. But it becomes a grind as you get older. I'm not saying you're older. You still got the energy of a 25-year-old. But you basically now are working a couple different jobs a day, if I'm not mistaken. Mad Dog Radio, K-Bad out there, which I love those people. I love that studio. I visited you there in person out in Las Vegas. What's the grind like for you? Because we talk about the grind for players all the time. Let's talk about the grind for a working guy, a working radio guy.
Well, Mike, I'm happy you brought that up because there's a few things I wanted to talk about with that today, actually. Today's an anniversary for me. First off, I got 2 jobs. I'm the only one in sports talk radio, and I'm happy with it. I do 6 hours every day solo, the way you did solo. I don't talk to, no disrespect, I don't talk to board ops and producers much. I just do a solo show. I did it with Looney, our good friend for 14 years.
Good guy.
The best. And now I do a 2-hour local show on Raider Nation Radio from noon to 2. And then I go in every night and I'm on Mad Dog, great lineup, and I do 8 to midnight, 4 hours. So that's 6 hours a day. I got 2 podcasts, one with the Raiders, one with Looney. And I'm kicking off 2 new TV shows starting Friday, one with John Gruden. I'm hosting the John Gruden Show. And I'm also hosting an ABC show on Saturday nights after college football on the Raiders. But what's interesting about today in our phone call is that 2 years ago today, the night before the NFL started, after 17 and a half years with Fox Sports Radio, that was the longest run in the history of syndication behind Mike and Mike. Because Jim Rome left, as you know, Premier and went to CBS. So I'm just talking about it one place. And I was really proud of that. And I wanted to be there for 20 years. I wanted to hit that milestone, past Mike and Mike. And I found out through a mutual friend of mine that they weren't renewing my deal. They weren't firing me. I didn't get fired for cause. I didn't say anything. They had the right not to pick up my contract, which they did 5 times before. And the moral of the story is a mutual friend of ours called me, and he said, guess what? I found out that these scoundrels, these guys in management are waiting to call you sometime in the next week or 2 to tell you that you're done. And we were able to go out with my agent and get ahead of it and line up some better jobs, turned out to be better jobs, and make it so that management wasn't allowed to call me and say anything. They didn't say goodbye to me. And it was one of the proudest moments in my career that I mentor young people about. Contracts are going to come and go. You know that. You've been there. I've been there. But when you can do it on your own terms and you don't have to get that phone call from that program director who doesn't know nothing and wants to put a guillotine to your neck, it's one of the most fulfilling moments of my career. And it was 2 years ago tonight, the night before the NFL season started.
Yeah, they changed their format over there. They went with the TV guys more or less. I don't have a problem with it. The thing I did have a problem with at the time was the people that I thought were the bosses weren't making the decision. And they basically told Andy Furman and I, they didn't even give us 2 weeks. They said, we're decided to shuffle the deck. Well, that's what you say to 2 guys that are very, very good because you can't come up with any other reason. And you know what? That sort of was a downer. But then I ended up on ESPN. So like my wife has said, like this is famous all the time. And I ended up at Bears Bar Room, got my own podcast. I'm happier now than I've ever been. I just think that you just got to keep moving. And if I had any advice, because here's the thing I know about you. I'm not going to say this about me, but I know this about you. JT loves what he does, but he doesn't have an ego. Period. I'm telling everybody this. He doesn't even use his real name. He branded another thing, JT. I don't even know his name. I've always called him JT the Brick. In fact, I think that's his real name, but he's afraid to tell me that's his real name. But things have really, I mean, when you look at it, if you hold a grudge, and this is what many in our business do, if they hold a grudge or if you let somebody get in your head, you're never going to go. And I'm sure it bothered you like it bothered me for a while. I'm not saying for months, maybe for a week or 2, but you got to let it go, don't you? And you got to move on.
Yeah, and Mike, that's a really, really important story, and I've only talked about it a little bit on my podcast.
Sure.
And I'll say it to you again. What happened, I did hold a grudge. I was pretty bitter about it for a couple of main reasons. One, I grew up at a time when my dad, when he graduated, when he retired from the government and had a retirement party, he got a gold watch. And it was a big deal, and I was there. I flew in for that, and that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted at Fox. I didn't want any accomplishment other than the fact that, hey, man, maybe I got 20 years in as a network, and they didn't owe me another show. They didn't owe me anything. They didn't. They were great to me.
That doesn't mean you can't be mad about it. That doesn't mean you can't be mad about it, right?
Yeah, and listen, again, as I always said, I have so many friends I don't like, I love over there. They're friends of mine who are still there. But the moral of the story is this. When a door closes, I wrote a book about this, The Handoff. When a door closes, another one opens. That's probably going to be better and bigger. But the key is you don't know it at the time. You can't see through the clouds and the ego and what you talk about with jealousy and anger and all that. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever, and I mean ever, happened to me, because the loyalty, my friends and all that, and it's just radio. Who gives a crap? It's radio. You know, I care more about my mom and dad and my kids and my wife, and that chapter in my life 2 years ago to today got me, I think, to be a better husband, a better father, a better radio host. I'm doing the best radio I've ever done in my career right now, so it's their loss, and it's SiriusXM's gain, and I'm having a great time. Best time of my career right now, Mike North.
And I echo what you say about those guys over there. I love a lot of them, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them. One of the guys that I keep in touch with said to me, why don't you stick around? They're offering you one day, keep your foot in the door. And this is where my ego did take over. I said, I made the door. I'm not worried about getting my foot in the door at that place. And they gave me, I had 6 wonderful years there, and then you just move on. Let's talk about the Bears, because I want to get your take on the Chicago Bears from a distance right now. Trubisky getting batted around, 25-year-old quarterback, 48 touchdowns, 29 interceptions, 8,500 yards, 63%. Passer and a percentage at 85% quarterback rating. You would have thought that he was Steve Young his second year at Tampa. What's your take on the Bears going in?
Well, it's a great big question, and I'll tell you, I was there in London last year when the Raiders beat the Bears and saw the Bears just have a bad game, and I spent some time before the game with Khalil Mack. I love Khalil Mack. I grew up with Lawrence Taylor, and he's the greatest athlete player I've seen physically on the field. I put him up there with Ray Lewis and Lawrence Taylor, so you won't find a bigger Mack fan than me. Look, the Trubisky deal is really unique because I don't think he's a bust. He's not a bust at the level of Ryan Leaf and Jamarcus Russell and a bust. But the fact, and I've heard you evolve on this, we've talked about it, and the fact is he's in a really tough situation because of the way they made that deal and traded up to get him with Mahomes and Watson. So that will never go away. He's going to be compared to maybe the greatest quarterback other than Brady of all time in Mahomes. Watson, we just saw his contract, and he's in a massive media market in Chicago where the media and fans are very critical. But when I've seen him play and make plays outside the pocket and his big arm strength, if he was in a different market, maybe he'd have more room and a little less pressure. But this is it. I said this on my show last night on Mad Dog. They're talking about a controversy. He's going to start. I give him a couple games because his contract status is up. You don't got to pay him again long term. So let's see if he can get the team off to a good start or a decent start and save his career. And if not, we'll know by week 3 or 4, Mike, he's toast. If he doesn't get off to a good start, he's done. The Bears will move on. They'll make the quarterback change, and then Trubisky's going to have to start as a backup next year somewhere else and earn his right to stay in the league. So it's a tough spot for the kid, but I'm pulling for him.
Boy, impressive numbers that he's had for 3 years, but you're right. I mean, the quarterback takes the brunt, but even your buddy Khalil Mack and 17 other Bears I counted had down years last year, so he's been made somewhat as a scapegoat. Did we win? Is the Khalil Mack, because I just said Khalil Mack played decent last year, but he didn't have the year he had the year before. You were there when he was MVP of the Oakland Raiders back in the day, 2016 defensive MVP. That's a lot of mileage in the league. Did you win the Mack trade going into this year?
Well, that's a great question, and a lot of people think that the Raiders won the Mack trade because it gave them the equity to go out and get Josh Jacobs, a running back out of Alabama. They never have their franchise running back if they don't move Mack. And at the time, the Raiders didn't have $90 million guaranteed for him, $60 million in a signing bonus. The Raiders didn't have that as they were moving their facility and their organization to Las Vegas. And look, I would have loved nothing more. If Mac was on this team now, well, the Raiders wouldn't have the players that they have, which I think the roster's better. But it's a question that's going to stand the test of time. Mac's going into Canton, Ohio, someday into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think he's that good. But for the Raiders, they were a 5-11 team with him as a defensive MVP. If they kept him and gave him all that money after they gave Carr that franchise money, they'd still be maybe a 6-7 win team. Now they have their own players. They're rebuilding with the Clemson players and the Alabama players. I mean, Henry Ruggs III, Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow, Cleveland Farrell, Trayvon Mullins. I mean, it looks like a young NFL college all-star team like back in the day that used to play at Soldier Field with Ditka. This team is young. They're on the rise, and a lot of it has to do, Mike, unfortunately, with not paying Mac and having the ability to get those Bears draft picks.
Yeah, that was. It turns out it was a good deal, I think, and the best of both worlds for both teams. We'll see what happens this year. We got Aldo Gandia, my guy, our guy,
Aldo,
jumping on, and he's got some chat board questions, and he's got questions of his own. Aldo?
Hey, JT, you've got a lot of your fans in the chat room and a lot of new fans, too. They're just loving your take on sports, and I'll start with a question from an old fan of yours, Q from Cincy. He wants to know, he's got two questions. He wants to know your thoughts on Joe Burrow, and he wants to know who's going to win a Super Bowl first, the Raiders or the Bengals?
Well, I think the Raiders will, because I think the Raiders have the finances now to do it, the stadium. They're going to be able to get free agents here in Gruden. Gruden gets one more Super Bowl. He gets a gold jacket, and he's got a 10-year deal. So the Bengals are in a complete rebuild. I love Burrow. Burrow was unbelievable. Look, if you look at the quarterbacks of the last couple of years, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, they were, Watson won a national championship, but you had Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, when my son goes to school at Oklahoma. Burrow comes in and shatters all of their records. I mean, Brett Favre, you don't even remember what college he went to, what he did in college, and you look at Burrow, Joe Burrow has had one of the, if not the greatest career ever in the history of college football. He's a pure franchise quarterback. He's a can't miss. He'll put that team back on the map again, but it probably takes another 2 drafts and another 2 free agency classes. And again, you got to get free agents to come to Cincinnati, and that's never easy.
Yeah. Q from, Heart 4803 wants to know about Nick Kwiatkowski's transition to going from the Chicago Bears to the Raiders. And we noticed yesterday that he was announced as one of the captains.
Yeah, great question. This is a big one because he probably knows more about Kwiatkowski than I do. I saw him in the London game last year, and the Raiders went all in on 2 linebackers. They got Corey Littleton from the Rams, who played in the Super Bowl, and they got Kwiatkowski, who is supposed to take the next step. He'll have the green dot on the back of his helmet. Think of that. He's never played a game with the Raiders, and he'll be calling the defensive plays for Paul Gunther, and he's going to stay on the field. The Raiders needed multiple linebackers that could put their hands on Travis Kelce, slow down some of these tight ends, not have to come off the field on 3rd and long because they couldn't drop back into coverage. Now Kwiatkowski comes in as almost a savior for this team. So, again, I respect the Bears fans who watched this kid play because Mayock and Gruden saw him and pounced on him quickly and got him in because they think he's going to be the foundation of the stability of a Raider defense that has been a really bad defense for a number of years. He's a building block and more.
I'll tell you this about Nick. 2 years ago, Bears versus Packers at Soldier Field. I'm watching the kickoff, and I got my eyes trained on Nick, and he, on the special teams, he levels this Packer guy that I think the guy is still asleep. And that is Nick Kwiatkowski's calling card. He is a ferocious hitter. As a linebacker, his sideline-to-sideline speed is not great, but he has done so much work in the film room anticipating plays that he can keep up with players because he just knows what the offense is going to do. So he's a great pickup for the Raiders.
For the football, Aldo and JT, is unbelievable. I'm a Butkus guy. I heard you say Taylor and everything else. I got a good argument for my guy Butkus. But the thing that made Butkus was he knew where the ball was going to go.
Right.
He knew. He just had that sniffed-out feeling. Kwiatkowski had the same thing. And the thing that bothers me, JT he's going to be an every down back. And we tried Leonard Floyd, and we got Danny Trevathan. We've tried to push everybody in there, and we get rid of a guy that John Gruden and Mayock like, Aldo.
Exactly.
And that troubles me because they know talent.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that was an interesting pickup for the Raiders because, again, they needed a guy. When you're playing the AFC West, and this is a really important point I want to make about what's happening out west here, is that Gruden, people wonder, why did Gruden break up Del Rio's team that won 12 games? Why did Gruden and Mayock come in here and just flip the roster? Because they're going up against Kansas City. And as you know, and Mike, you were there, and Aldo, you saw what the Bulls did with Jordan until they were able to get by the Pistons, right? But until they were able to get by the bad boys, they were going nowhere. And that's the same philosophy out here, where Gruden wants to build the team with the principles of Belichick in New England, where the head coach has a ton of power, he's in charge of personnel like Belichick, and he can coach the players up. But the key is also, very important point I'm going to make here, is that Gruden and Mayock want their guys, the guys that they drafted instead of the guys who are on the roster, so they can mold it their way and try to match up. The reason they took Henry Ruggs as the first ever Las Vegas Raider over CeeDee Lamb, and they took him over Jerry Jeudy, is because they wanted a matchup like Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, that matchup has destroyed the Raiders. So they got a guy who can play chess against Kansas City and do the same thing. And there's only a few coaches in the NFL that have the gravitas and the ability to get a 10-year deal of $100 million and build the team the way they want to build it.
Yeah, for sure. Josh Jacobs, he was not one of those captains announced for the team. Any speculation as to why that was the case? And also, fantasy football owners want to know, what kind of a season do you anticipate for Jacobs?
Jacobs had an unbelievable year last year, but he missed a couple of games due to injury because, they pounded him pretty hard. I think the big change with Jacobs this year is going to be he's going to catch the ball a lot more out of the backfield. Darren Waller had 90 receptions at tight end, 90, and only 3 touchdowns. And Josh Jacobs had a really good year running the ball in between the tackles, but he didn't catch it a lot. So look, if you're a fantasy player and you're looking at the Las Vegas Raiders, for Darren Waller to have double digits in touchdowns, and Josh Jacobs, I think, is going to have 4, 5, 6 touchdowns as a receiver coming out of the backfield. That's something Gruden wants to do. In regards to who the captain is, they have their offensive captains led by Derek Carr. So I don't think that's a slight for him, but he's got to have a big year because the Raiders, they need him to step up and be healthy. He can't miss games. If he misses games, the Raiders are in trouble. They don't have a lot of depth at running back.
I know that you guys were going to talk some gambling, so a lot of people in the chat room want to know from you what is your lock. But one more from Q from Cincy. He just put this one in. He wants to know where and how is Looney?
Looney's great. I do a podcast with him every week, and you can download that podcast wherever you download your podcast, jtandlooney.com. And, I worked with him for 14 years. He originally, a guy named Andrew Ashwood hired him to take the edge off of me. He said, you're too serious about sports. You need to smile more on the radio. So they brought me in a partner who ended up being an update anchor and a co-host, and now he's like a brother to me. So we visit each other on a podcast every week where we talk about everything from COVID-19 to politics to movies, and we try to lighten it up a little bit. So I appreciate the listener asking that. It means a lot.
When I went to California to do 3 days out there at the Fox Studios, the most gracious guy. He says, Mike, I'll pick you up. I'll take you around. We spent some time together. Just a terrific guy is Tom Looney. Anything else, Aldo?
Well, all I got to say is I am highly anticipating a lock from you and JT because I got some money in my pocket and I want to place it on a team that's going to double or triple it for me. What do you guys got?
Right, go on. Now, first thing I'm going to ask, of course, my guy JT, all right, because after all, we are going to basically pick games every week. We've won for 3 straight years.
Yep.
The one year we got off, I mean, in the NFL to go 18-1-1, that's what put me on the map as a handicapper and responsible, the Bears Barroom, for helping me get my gig at ESPN 1000 because of that. But, JT, first of all, how many games the Raiders going to win?
I think the Raiders might go over the win total of 7.5. I think the Raiders are a 9-win team. 10 wins will get them into the playoffs. Their schedule, you hear everybody say this about schedule. They got Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes twice, Phillip Rivers. They got a really tough schedule, and I think that's always been their Achilles heel. But they were a 7-win playoff team last year. They should have at least been 8-8. I think they're a win better than that. I have the Raiders winning 9 games in the AFC West in the NFL.
Are you surprised at 7.5? I thought it would have been higher. I know the Bears even got a higher one right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, again, a lot of that had to do with the schedule. when the Raiders' schedule came out, they had Tampa Bay with Jameis Winston. Now they have Tampa Bay with Tom Brady. They got Mahomes twice. You look at what they have to do, and they're playing the AFC North, and they're playing the NFC South. So they got some tough games there. And again, the Raiders are a team that a lot of people want to pick against because they're Renegades and they're Mavericks and the logo and all that. So 7.5, I think is fair until they get back into the playoffs. I don't think you'll see the Raiders over a win total of 8. So I think they got the number right.
Yeah.
All right, real quick, people don't know this. Last year, I pointed out to everybody that one of my favorite Cowboy stars of all time was Randolph Scott, and a lot of people don't know this. The Raider logo. That man with the patch.
Oh,
that's Randolph Scott.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And Al Davis was friends with the guy, apparently. And that was modeled after Randolph Scott, the jut-jawed Cowboy star from the 50s, 60s, who was a wealthy real estate guy in California for so many years. So a little Raider trivia.
Wow.
Yeah, what's your lock this week?
All right, here's my lock, and this will stay in the NFC North, and this will get people to remember even this podcast even more because it's a team you're familiar with. My lock is the Vikings. The Vikings over 9 wins. I have to make my Super Bowl pick coming up tonight on my show, and I have the Vikings in Seattle in the NFC Championship game. I'm one of the few believers, and I don't believe everything that Kirk Cousins says, but they got Yannick Ngakoue. Mm-hmm. They got that pass rusher from Jacksonville who's possibly the best pass rusher in football other than Mac. Mm-hmm. And they got him coming off the edge. And I just like the balance of Minnesota, D-line, linebackers, especially their secondary. I think they can run it with Cook, Thielen at wide receiver. They got weapons there. I just like the Vikings. I think the Vikings last year were a playoff team. They were as good as any team. They went into Santa Clara against the 49ers and got humiliated, embarrassed in that game. Niners went on to the Super Bowl. I think Minnesota upgraded in the offseason. I like the Vikings over 9 wins this year. The Vikings win double digits at a minimum 10 games.
All right, and last but not least, before we let you go, Las Vegas -3 versus Carolina at Carolina.
Wow. Well, that's interesting, Mike. You know this much better than I do. The Raiders on an East Coast 10 a.m. game for a West Coast team as a road favorite. Here's what you need to know about this game. John Gruden, who has Rod Marinelli, a defensive line coach, Tom Cable, a former head coach, they're going up against a brand new coaching staff with Matt Rule. Brand new. They haven't even had a preseason game. Okay, Teddy Bridgewater is their new franchise quarterback. If the Raiders can't go into Carolina with this loaded team off season, the upgrades in Gruden and have an advantage, I'll be surprised. So I like the Raiders to win a really close game on the road. I don't think they cover. I think the Raiders win by a point or two. I think it's a close game or it's a push. But I got the Raiders winning at Carolina, but I don't have them covering the spread.
And I also know this, if they lose, Derek Carr will be mad at you again next week.
Well, if Carr doesn't win this game, get this. He comes home, and Carr comes home to the first ever game in the history of Las Vegas against Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Michael Thomas in a dome. So if the Raiders don't win this game, And then after that game, they have to travel and take on Belichick on the road at Foxborough. So you asked me about the Raiders' schedule. They got one here that they got to win because then they get Breeze and Cam Newton back-to-back, and then they get Buffalo, who was a 10-win team in Vegas. So this is going to be some tough sledding, but it's a better team. We'll see if the Raiders, again, I think go over the win total. And you're going to be on with me all year, Mike, because you are a prognosticator that knows sports. You're not a gimmick salesman like in Vegas. We got people in Vegas now, literally because they have a Twitter feed and they have a little radio spot on a cable radio station, think they're experts. They're betting $5 a game. Mike North, everybody, doesn't bet $5 a game. If Mike North is betting a football game, it's not $20, I can promise you.
Well, that's why I got wrinkles in my face. But I'll tell you this before I let you go. You worked last night. You get up this morning in Las Vegas at 8 o'clock, which I know, some people might say it's early, but for a radio guy like you, and you didn't stutter. You didn't even stutter. You're on point as usual. I planned on keeping you for 20 minutes. You did it to me, kept you for 40. That's how damn good you are. JT, appreciate it, buddy.
Mike, you've had a really big influence on my career. You still do. Aldo, appreciate it. Thanks to everyone. Bears Barroom, I can't wait to have you on my show next week. We're going to have you on twice a month with your picks.
Thanks.
You document your picks. You're legitimate. It's an honor being on with you guys.
Thank you, JT.
Take care, buddy.
Woo.
Take care, guys.
That was
JT,
awesome.
JT the brick. Probably the best guest as far as fluidity we've ever had.
Gosh, I'm telling you, the chat.
No, he's a pro's pro, this guy.
Yeah, the chat room is a buzz. People loved his information. They loved the pace of the show. You guys were like you've done this before. You guys were like.
I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay.
Me and Jig, it's 1994. Then I'll make my picks. Mm-hmm. We'll play our picks after this because I'm not messing around.
Ooh,
that's it.
I love it.
No, I've had enough. The bubble this, bubble that, COVID this, COVID that. I'm making my picks. I'm kicking everybody's ass again this year. But that being said, Aldo, 1994, this guy comes up to me. Mm-hmm. He goes, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you at a commercial." I go, "All right." Jiggs goes, "Who the hell's that guy?" I go, "I don't know, but I'm like, he wants to talk to me. Seems like a good guy." I talked to him, and then I talked to him afterwards. He just seeked me out. And after the show, how do you get into radio? How did you do this? How did you do that? First time I ever met the guy. Huh. I spent about 15 minutes with him. The next thing I know, about a year or two later, he's on the radio.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So that's it. That's JT in a nutshell. And like we talk about in the business, and Aldo, you know this, you've been through it. Yep. It's an unpredictable business, no matter what venue you're in, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I was going to ask him this, but it got away from me. I was going to ask him to give some advice to young people in the business. And there's a lot of people who are middle-aged who are just getting into the business because of the proliferation of podcasts and so forth. So I'll ask you, what do you say to people who are saying, "Hey, I want to open up a podcast because my dream is to cover sports and leave my job, making widgets and talk behind a microphone." What kind of advice do you have for people like that?
Well, first of all, it's a little different now because most of these sports stations look for college graduates. Mm-hmm. They don't go out for the street guy anymore. They don't go out for that doesn't mean that somebody can't break the mold. I mean, I was the last guy to basically. I think if you check with people and you check around the country and you check sports radio hosts, I could say I'm one of maybe one who's a high school dropout. I mean, Mike Greenberg, for God's sake. Mike went to Northwestern,
mm-hmm.
Most of the talk show hosts, Mike Wilbon, he was another Northwestern guy. They're Syracuse guys. Right. So I would say this. Do your podcasts and keep doing them, no matter how old you are, mm-hmm. but it's a little bit tougher if you don't have college now, because the cookie cutter program directors, for the most part, look for people they can manage and that they can help steer. Mm-hmm. There's certain people you can't do that to, or there's certain people that if they do a rare, raw radio show, mm-hmm. it's going to be tougher to put in. Right. It really is.
Right.
You gotta. There's a guy named John Ziegler, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a few times. He's on CKG.
Mm-hmm.
John is a very well-spoken guy, too. He's got an opportunity. I think there's a couple guys that work at the bar room that have bigger opportunities coming their way. I won't mention names because I don't want to play favorites or anything else. I think there's a lot of talent in podcasting. And if I ran a station and I had to make an impact, the first place I'd go is to many podcasts because you're going to hear the actual real guy.
Right.
If you bring them in and say, we want to hear what you're going to do on this radio format for a tryout, you might hear a different guy. So I'd be more raw, but, that's another subject for another day, to be honest with you. But seriously, it's a tough business right now, and people are just trying to hang on to their jobs.
You're absolutely right, Mike. I couldn't agree with you more, in my opinion. And one of the things we'll carve out a little time in an upcoming show is just to talk a little bit about how the Barroom Network is so similar to the startup days of the Score Sports Radio. I mean, it really
Forget
is.
about that. It's similar to – look, I've told you many times. I don't know, Aldo's the businessman of Bears Barroom. But, folks, if you want a platform and you think you could do a podcast, call Aldo. Or email Aldo.
That's right.
Because Bears Barroom gives opportunities to people.
Yep.
And then once people and I think what's good about Bears Barroom is I remember a guy named Eddie Zona. He said to me, "You got a pretty good softball team here with Lettuce." I go, "Yeah." I got Licorice. It was called Licorice. It was the old Lettuce team.
Right.
I think we can win some championships and stuff like that. Well, we won a ton. But I said, you know what? We got a lot of players. And he said, you know what? Grab the best players you can. And we won 2 national championships on this advice out of 4 years. I go, but what about this guy and that guy? If they don't think they're good enough, they'll quit. Or they'll leave and find another team. That's all. And that's exactly the way that he did it with a team called the Bobcats that won national championship. And he alienated many friends and everything else, but he never said you're off the team. But when he made out the lineup and you weren't playing, then you would take yourself off the team eventually, either during the season or next year.
Wow. Great stuff. And again, we got in a future show, we got to carve out some more time. I want to know more about those softball days because you got some great stories to talk about regarding those days and stuff that we can learn about for today. Good lessons.
I listen. Our softball teams drank good too. We won and we drank good. They talked about the Oakland A's. We played a tournament, and I'll never forget in Frankfurt. The next thing I know, we started drinking there. And at 1 a.m, I was in Crestwood pitching quarters behind a bar. And, you don't even know how you got there. Those were wonderful days. The next day wasn't, but those were wonderful days.
I know.
But you know what's wonderful now?
Yes!
Yes! Our first week of giving out picks.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the days when I'm making my picks and I don't know if the music's playing or not. And then Aldo goes, it's playing. And then I listen to the podcast and it's playing. And I got 3 picks for everybody. First of all, jot this down. Jot this down. We haven't even talked yet, Aldo and I, because we kept JT forever. But we'll get to Trubisky in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But my God, Nagy, Trubisky, the Bears, they know how to beat Detroit. But they're going to Detroit. And they're 3-point underdogs? oh, God, I couldn't believe it. I thought the Bears would be -2.5, -1.5. I thought the game might be a pick.
Yeah.
And then I looked today. I had to look 3 times. I said to B, I go, B. And she said, really predictably, what? And I said, I can't believe this. The game started out as a pick, okay, in Las Vegas.
Right.
This is what I do, folks. I'm back in my comfort zone. I'm comfortable in my own skin. That's it. The Bears are getting 3? Take the Bears plus the 3. I'm not even playing around here.
Yes!
You're giving the Chicago Bears 3 points against who? The Lions? Okay, so that's number one.
I love it.
The Chicago Bears. Number two, and I got 3 games. And by the way, folks, I want to thank the guys at Vegas Scores and Odds. They were instrumental in many ways with Bears Bar with Aldo and I last year. They got hit with COVID. We had a real nice thing going with them, but they are right now, just trying to dig out like everybody else. And they've decided, and I decided, you know what? I'm moving on. They couldn't pay me what I wanted to be paid. And you know what? Ronnie, Smitty, Mo, Aldo, and I love you guys, and we won't forget what you did for us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for everything that you did for the barroom last year. And we're praying and hoping that you guys rebound back better than ever. Vegas Scores and Odds.
And that you start paying me again.
That's right. Well, that would be nice, too.
Exactly. Now, the second game, Aldo, who's everybody talking about? Aldo goes to me. I'll run into Aldo on the street. Mike, you know who everybody's talking about? I go, who? Your guy. I go, who? Russell Wilson in Seattle.
That's right. That's your
guy.
guy.
Really? I can't believe it. And Aldo's going, yeah, I'm puzzled. Well, who are they playing this week? And I go, I think they're playing the Atlanta Falcons. At Atlanta, getting 2. Take Atlanta, getting 2. Matt Ryan, sleeper team. Look out for Atlanta. So Chicago +3, Atlanta +2.
Love it.
Now, did I have a dream? Did I believe that Brady was back with New England? Did I really think that, you know what, he would leave? And that even after he left in what's supposed to be a changing of the guard, in the National Football League, because we now know that the other guy, Tom Brady, went to Tampa. Well, it's like he never left. Cam Newton, a lot to prove. Bears didn't want to bring him in because I believe that Mitch would have lost his job, or Foles if he was there, to Cam Newton. New England picks him up, and they're 6.5-point favorites against the Miami Dolphins. I'm taking New England. So, hey, remember this. No matter how we start out, by the end of 16 weeks, Aldo knows this since we've been together, we win. But we have no idea, for the first time, Aldo, since I started handicapping and losing at the age of 14, I have less information this year than ever before because of no basic preseason games and no fans and everything else. So just be patient. Hopefully we'll get off to a good start, but go right the first week, folks. And I have, once again, the Bears, Atlanta, and New England. Aldo, back to you.
Outstanding advice, Mike. Outstanding, truly. I mean, I think that's exactly what everyone should do who is in the gambling business, start light, because all of our sources, all of your sources, the people you call up and say, how's this guy look? How's that guy look? Well, I don't know.
How about football games that we watched 2 or 3, 4 preseason games to form an opinion?
Right, exactly. Nothing. There's nothing out there, so we're flying blind here. But I love all 3 picks.
God.
I did it. Oh, my God. I'm so sorry. I hate all 3 picks.
BB, go get the hammer. It's in the... Thanks. No, I'm kidding. Hey, you know what? Here's what I'm going to tell everybody. We could go 3-0, 0-3, but if you bet 100, bet 50. If you bet 1,000, bet 300.
Yes.
Don't blow your wad
right
on the first week, especially with no games
right
to go off of. I don't know how these guys are going to look. They don't know how they're going to look. They've been practicing against their own guys.
Right. Mike has given tons of great advice regarding gambling. Harp just says Aldo just gave the kiss of death by endorsing his picks. Thanks, Harp. But the best advice, perhaps.
Harp just said Aldo pulled up the hearse. He wants you to jump in the back. He says there's a big silver box back there. You just crawl in and shut the lid.
But I love the advice that you've given from the very first show is manage the money. And don't bet just for the sake of betting. Do the research and make sure you're laying something down that you're going to feel confident about.
But if you don't think that I can win these 3 games, go opposite. I used to have a betting site called Don't Fade Me. It was basically don't go against me. And people did go against me. I mean, if you went against me 2 years, forget about last year. When I went 18-1-1, you're Aldo's landscaper. That's what you are now. Period.
I love it. All right, before we pull the plug on this one, let's talk a little bit about Mitchell Trubisky. If you are a follower of the Mike North Advantage, you know that Mitch is Mike's guy. He has endorsed him. He was a little bit weary at first, but as he saw more and heard more and talked about him more, all of a sudden Mike has been a firm supporter of Mitchell Trubisky. So you must have been really, really happy when he was announced as a starter, and not just announced as a starter, but the coaching staff, Ryan Pace, and the players all said that he earned it. It was a close competition, but that he earned it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it was close, and I'll tell you why. Because Foles knows the system, but you can know the system, but you have new players. He didn't get a chance to play a whole lot with them. His wife was pregnant. We had the COVID situation. Mitch was in Buffalo Grove practicing with the skill position players.
Yeah, that's right.
I was puzzled by people that I know football, that had Foles winning. I said, there's nothing that tells me he's got a chance. And plus, he came off a clavicle injury. And for folks that aren't familiar, it's almost like the Foles people, Aldo, say he won a Super Bowl, and they ignored the last 2 years. They ignored last year with Jacksonville. Or look what he did with Philadelphia. No, you got to go off your last performance. And it was a horrible performance. One of the top 5 worst free agents, I think, in NFL history. 4 years for $88 million at Jacksonville, booed off the field twice. And this is who people were putting their money on. I just found it hard to believe. I think the Bears have been gunning since day one. The players love Mitch Trubisky. They don't like Mitch Trubisky. They swear by Mitch Trubisky, and that's just a tough situation to come into. Look, I just want to know one thing, and maybe Aldo could answer this. How come people, the same people, were willing to give Cutler 8 years, but they're not willing to give Trubisky 4? The same exact bunch of losers who also wanted Grandel. Sox lost last night because he can't catch. I've been right about McCann. Can I just say this real quick? I've never seen a 340 hitter in my time watching baseball that sat 3 games in a row.
Unbelievable. And he caught
bias there, no doubt, because of money. But we'll get to them in a minute.
Mike, real quick, Mike. He caught the no-hitter. McCann did. Right. He caught the no-hitter, and he's well. Go ahead. It's frustrating.
It wasn't shook off.
That's right. The guy is a star.
Hitting 340, I have never seen outside of injury. A batter at the time hitting 340, but they know he's an unrestricted free agent. They're giving Grandel the bats. They're taking the bat out of McCann's hands, hoping. I'm not kidding you. I know this organization. They don't want him to succeed. They would have played him by now.
Right.
And I'm thinking next year when we play 162 games, I got a stat today. Sorry, Bear fans. I'll get back to the Bears in just a second. I'm going to give you guys a stat today. The under 500 teams, the White Sox are 19-5. Okay? 19-5. They're beating the teams they're supposed to. But over 500, 7-11. Period. When they play a full schedule next year, it's going to be a different ballgame. This has been what they're supposed to do, and I give all the credit in the world. But I'm not going to automatically think we're going to go places next year. I got to see a full schedule. Let's just get into the tournament this year. It's great, but play your best players. And if you're not going to play your best players, you're not going to go all the way and win the big enchilada at the end.
Yep, I'm with you. So regarding what you just said about Mitchell Trubisky, I got a soundbite here from Allen Robinson, who is probably going to have a super year. It's a contract year for him. He caught, 90?
Can I fess up?
Yes.
I was against Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
I'll just say it plain and simple. That was a mistake. Go ahead. It's been bothering me.
Well, and you're allowed one a season, right?
Thank you. Well, yeah, but I had a caveat. I said the first year Jordy Nelson played as good, which he did. But it was stupid. It was a great pickup by Pace.
Yeah, it definitely was, and it will be a bonehead.
One of his good pickups that nobody talks about.
Really, but it will be a bonehead decision by Pace if he doesn't sign him to an extension. But this is Allen Robinson talking about Mitchell Trubisky earning that quarterback position. He was asked if he was surprised.
For me training with Mitch early in the spring, going leading up into training camp, I was out there, all those days with him where he was putting in the work, constantly, even if it wasn't, some days where it may just be a couple of us out there, so, I mean, to see him start, is not surprising at all. When you put in the work, you get the results, and I saw a lot of the work that he put in, from February, March, and even probably some before that, so I saw him put the work in, so, I mean, it's not surprising at all that he was able to, really improve his game, how he set out to do.
I love the fact that Mitchell Trubisky reached out to Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, a bunch of the other players and said, let's work out together. It's something that he couldn't do under the umbrella of the Chicago Bears because of the collective bargaining agreement. But he took it on his own and really worked hard at establishing a better rapport with those receivers. This is his year. He's got to go out there and get it done and put up some decent numbers over 3,000.
Let me ask you a question then, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's say Sunday, he throws 3 touchdowns for 340 yards.
Right.
Okay, 1 interception.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
And the Bears lose 35-28. Are we really going to blame Mitch Trubisky?
I'm not, that's for sure. Those are great numbers.
That's the whole point I'm making here
Sure.
when I say 17 people last year on that team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Eddie Jackson does not get a pass from me. Khalil Mack did not play as well. I still love him, and I want him. I disagree with JT, about Mack and Taylor. I'm a Butkus guy, but they're all 3 great, so it doesn't matter to me. And Mack's on our team.
Yep.
Bottom line is that when you start looking at what the Chicago Bears can do, Aldo, the sky's the limit.
Yep.
The sky's the limit. And I look at what Nagy and Pace, they didn't want Foles to win this job. I think they brought in Foles to be Mariano Rivera. Come in.
There you go.
If he has 3, how about all the other guys that had down years? The offensive line, if Nick Foles plays behind that offensive line instead of the one he had in Philly, he'll get killed.
That's right.
They got to play better up front, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, you and I go back to the Jim Finks era.
Right.
You build a team at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
You've got to dominate and control the line of scrimmage because I don't care who is at quarterback. I've seen Peyton Manning, when he had poor offensive lines, start to wince even before he was getting hit because the defensive linemen were getting into his head. Even the great quarterbacks. That's one of the reasons Tom Brady has been so great is because Bill Belichick did whatever was possible to give him a clean pocket, get rid of the ball quickly, good offensive lineman, blah, blah, blah. And that has to happen here in Chicago for whoever is the quarterback, but especially for Mitch because he still, is getting his bearings, like you have pointed out a number of times, only one college football season, and so it's going to take time to develop. And so hopefully last year was just a bit of an aberration because the offensive line suffered, because there were no timeouts.
17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't do as bad as people think. Believe me, I've seen bad Bear quarterbacking. and remember this, the media in this town doesn't know the quarterback position.
Yeah.
And I want to still know, why were you willing to give Cutler 8 years? And not an up-and-coming guy with a chance who's 25 years old another year. And bring in a guy that's had nothing but injuries, although I will say this. I don't care who the quarterback is. Leonard Fournette's a piece of – I mean, to me, to start – I finally got a real quarterback now.
Yeah, that's awful.
You want to know something? Walter Payton led the league in rushing with Bobby Avellini.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
Barry Sanders destroyed people with Scott Mitchell at quarterback. O.J. Simpson with Joe Ferguson. You're nothing but an excuse maker, and Jacksonville was smart to get rid of your tired ass. You're a running back. If you need a great quarterback to produce, shame on you. Jim Brown. I'll name them all.
Yeah.
Adrian Peterson didn't have the greatest quarterbacks. Are you out of your mind?
I love
Unbelievable.
it. I love it.
Taking cheap shots at people.
Man, what a great way to finish this show with with Mike
That pisses me off.
just going off on Leonard
Yeah,
Fournette.
by the way, the quarterback was Foles.
That's right. That quarterback
Did
was
you
Nick
know
Foles.
that Nick Foles was leading the league in fumbles until he got benched last year? 7?
I do
Did
know
you
that.
guys know that? Does anybody write about this crap? That he led the league of quarterbacks with the most fumbles until he got benched, and then naturally Phillip Rivers or somebody passed him by. Does anybody write this stuff?
No, they don't. I just hope one thing. I hope we don't see Nick Foles take a single snap this season. I hope he does a great job on the sidelines helping Mitch become the quarterback we all wish he can.
He's a little taller than Mike Glennon. He can move, and he's got the Super Bowl trophy. But he's also got his last game of 97 yards and 3 interceptions, which everybody wants to ignore for some reason.
That's right. Lots of people. Yep. Hey, the last word is going to go to Q from Cincy. He says, man, oh, man, great show. So
thank you.
And everyone in the chat room has been so engaging and participating in talk. Love you guys all. Thanks you for listening.
Give us a listen on the podcast again. Because
yes.
JT was fantastic. Aldo was on his game. You know what? I was rolling. We having some fun.
Yeah. And by the way, we've got a lot of great new news. I'm just going to share one now.
Oh, yeah. Talk about it real quick.
Yeah. Next week, Mike North is on video. That is right. But they were moving this show to our YouTube channel.
Got any makeup?
That's something for me to
You got a new show coming on.
That's right. Well, we just started last night. We debuted Dan and Aldo.
You and Danny.
That's right. Bare Their Souls. It's a R-rated show. It just Dan Aguirre, who is a masterful storyteller, and Dan and I just we went. We were going to go an hour, Mike, and it went 2 hours. It's like,
well, hey, I know the feeling. I told you before when JT came on. Aldo will give 20, 25 minutes. You said fine. The next thing you know, we're asking. I mean, the guy was on his game. You don't let go of guests. That's what I think's wrong with terrestrial radio.
Yes.
Not only that you get the same guests and people know what they're going to say, but sometimes you keep people too long. But when you get a great guest, you got to get rid of them because of a clock. So this is what's beautiful about doing Bears Barroom.
I love it, and I love you, Mike North. I can't wait for our next show. The makeup is in the mail, all right, brother?
It's going to be fun. I might have to shave.
I might too. I got like a 6-month-old beard on me.
You look good. You look like you lost. You're keeping the weight down.
Yeah, I am, thank God. And I haven't been drinking as much beer. In fact, I haven't had a beer in weeks, so that's helped a lot.
What's there to drink about?
That's right.
Hey, let's celebrate. We haven't been out in 6 months.
All right,
so long, everybody.
All righty.